Hey, how's it going, America? Welcome to another episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies. Going to be a lot of Zoobox Goes to the Movies content coming at you since everybody's stuck at home watching movies. All those movies that were in the theaters before all this mess started are pretty much on video on demand services, so you can look forward to that in the coming weeks. Probably going to go through most of them. Most of what's available, anyways. But today, we're going to be talking about a couple, one documentary and one fake documentary.
Yes.
Very special time. Very special time. See, this is how we do it. This is planned. These things are, we pair things that are appropriate. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we're going to have a very politically divisive documentary and then a movie that was put on a shelf for a long time, but you could find it. You could find it out there back in the day. So we're going to be talking about The Rise of Jordan Peterson, the recently released documentary about the quote-unquote controversial figure, Jordan Peterson, who's a psychology professor from Canada, and who Dan and I are pretty familiar with. If you actually watched our review or listened to our review of Ad Astra, we talk a little bit about Jordan Peterson in that relative to that movie, because it made sense. And then we're going to be talking about the found footage / fake faux documentary, the Poughkeepsie tapes. The
old a mockumentary, I guess is the proper.
Well, faux documentary,
faux
fake
found footage.
Because a mockumentary is more like Spinal Tap, right? It's like making fun of. It's more like satire.
I guess so. Yeah.
It's not. This is more. I say the Poughkeepsie tapes is more analogous to Lake Mungo than it would be to like Spinal Tap or something like that.
Yeah, within like an investigation or the premise of the police, which we'll get into. But let's start off with The Rise of Jordan Peterson.
Okay, so The Rise of Jordan Peterson, you saw this a while ago, but you said you had watched it recently again, and then it showed up on Amazon Prime. So and then I watched it too because I'd been curious about seeing it, even though I know there wasn't really anything super revelatory in the documentary other than just kind of getting to see some of his regular life, his family life, what his house looks like, shit like that. So what did you think of the documentary Rise of Jordan Peterson? What were your thoughts?
I thought it was good. I would give it like a 7 out of 10. And maybe it's because if you didn't know who Jordan Peterson was, this would probably be a lot more impactful in some ways. But I do appreciate the documentarian or whoever directed this or whoever put this together. Yeah. Really getting everyone's side of the story. It really did feel like most sides of the story were heard and most viewpoints.
Yeah, I would agree. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. It's like kind of a brief summary of the past couple years of his career.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty short. It's like 90 minutes long. And it's just kind of trying to talk about the environment and then the way in which he kind of came to prominence. It's really not so much about Jordan Peterson. Rather, it's more about everything that surrounds Jordan Peterson and some of the people that he knows even, you know, and they kind of give talking head commentary about what they think about what he's doing and his new position, his newfound fame, etc. I thought it skewed more negative. I think it's implicit because of the amount of people that are kind of, some of them unfairly negative towards him, get a lot more screen time than maybe than the opposite position. In my opinion, it did. So I kind of felt like this air of like almost trying to convince you that he's more controversial than he really is. That's, I kind of got that sense because it was just, it seemed to almost sensationalize the quote unquote controversial things that he said. I mean, they juxtapose, especially, when they talk about his early rise to prominence, about the pronoun stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It juxtaposes like what he says he believes, and they don't really give it that clear of an airing, but they constantly go back to the other side of that discussion, who are just kind of defaming him left and right. Constantly throughout the documentary, they're always cutting back to him, even though they're kind of that part of the story is kind of over. So I thought that was a little I don't know if it was on purpose or maybe it's just because of my awareness of everything. It's like one of these things, just like I just maybe know too much or more. So maybe I felt that. I'm not sure if that's really the movie's fault or just because I have so much exposure to the other side of that conversation. I don't know. What did you think? You felt it was more even keeled?
I I think it raised some very important questions, and I didn't really see it as, maybe it is because though I know so much of the situation that it changes the way I would watch it if I have never known who he was.
Yeah.
Because I never got this fact that they were on purpose generally pushing one side or the other. I would just think that his voice has been heard so much throughout the world, and there are so many people that are at least aware of who he is,
Mm-hmm.
and that he does have so many followers. I feel like this would be made for more of the people that follow Jordan Peterson, not necessarily for the other side. I felt like this was a way that the people who do follow Jordan Peterson could get a perspective of what the other side was thinking.
I think that's fair. Yeah,
That's the way
point.
I viewed it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, but what would you think if you hadn't really, if you kind of only tertiarily knew about Jordan Peterson? Because almost everybody in the Western world has at least heard his name, probably.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that what do you think if you were like more of a blank canvas? Can you like put yourself in the shoes and think like what would you walk away from this with?
I would, if I blank canvas that overall, that Jordan Peterson probably turned into the one thing that he was trying to fight, which is an ideology, or some sort of proverbial idol to, like, he doesn't want to. You should never value any one perspective more than the other, and it seems like that his perspective was, in his own mind, maybe he was thinking that he was the solution, maybe, and that is not, like, it kind of, that maybe he is part of the problem. It's kind of what it was leaning towards, in a sense, I think. Like, he kind of, all those things he was talking against.
Well, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they have an audio clip of him giving an interview or talking to somebody where and it was before he blew up or whatever, he explicitly states that he does not want to be just like a mouthpiece for the other side. Like, he doesn't want to be a figurehead in that sense. I think most of, like, his position in the world or his position in that conversation is not necessarily his fault. I mean, granted, when you get opportunity, he took opportunities as they came to kind of bolster his message or whatever you want to call it. But there was obviously an audience that was very hungry for that message. I mean, that's what his success is. He didn't build his success himself. People built that success for him. You know what I mean? Like, and
I think that's always how it is, though, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you can escape that. If you're the most, because there's other people that talk about the same things he talks about. Like, another example would be another Canadian professor, Gad Sad. Like, he talks about the same kind of things. I think he seems a little bit more like explicitly right-leaning these days, but because Jordan Peterson's always kind of squirrely about where he actually fit. It's like when you ask Jordan Peterson whether he believes in God or not. Like, he kind of gives this all over the place answer a little bit, which is fine because I think that's his own journey, is his own thing.
Well, I think he's just doing that so he doesn't, because he knows the power that he holds, and he doesn't want people to believe in God because he does. He wants people to believe in God because they choose to, not follow him. Because I think that's why he's always been like, that's a difficult thing for me to really answer, because what is God to me might be what God is to me may be different for you, but I don't think you should believe in my God or whatever, that presumptive.
But on the base of a lot of what he says, though, is this idea that kind of this Christian value system that kind of permeates the Western world is inherently a good thing, and it should cause you to act out in the world as if God does exist. So he does have a perception of what he thinks of as like a quote unquote God. He does have an archetype for it. I tend to think that he is just more believes in the power of the traditions rather than actually an explicit like
Well, I mean,
godlike figure. I
sure.
mean, that's always what it came off to me.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
I think you said it perfectly when you said basically act like there's a God with this Christian God. It will lead you to having a better life or whatever,
yeah,
or
yeah.
more better morals. But uh, I mean, because if his works are so, even when you go through his biblical series, which I've watched probably 90% of it,
Yeah, me too, actually.
fallen asleep many times to
It's
the
like,
biblical lectures.
what are they, like 8, 12, 3-hour lectures? I mean,
Yes, I don't even know how many there are. There might be a lot more than that, honestly.
well,
I just don't know. I don't know. His perspective is more from morality, not from just a Christian sense, but with the morals that Christianity brings. Uh, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. But I guess if we can get into quote unquote the spoiler zone a little bit more.
well, I don't think you can
Um,
really spoil this. So, I
no,
mean,
well, I mean, you could. There are some key things I think
what
that
it's
are
read.
really important. It's more about the thing I found the most interesting about the documentary was how his lifelong friends, like his friends, these are cherry picked or certain people, but they seem to be really good friends with him.
They or have been in the past. Yeah.
Well, one guy specifically that wrote that op-ed that basically was, fuck
The
Jordan Peterson, he's crazy.
the
He's
the
lost it.
Judas.
Which was sitting there, and Jordan Peterson admits multiple times. I've heard him countless times admits that he is a agreeable, generally more liberal person minded wise.
Yeah.
Like he's talks about, he's like, hey, listen, like I am not some right wing guy. I'm not some guy that believes in everything that the right does. I don't believe in everything the left does. But it was that interesting perspective of this. I think Jordan Peterson lived in the top floor of their house, like his whole family for a little while. Like it's this guy, and I think he went. What was his job? Like he was something like
He
a
was
intellectual.
well, he was whose job? The guy he was staying with? They were they were
Yeah,
professors.
yeah, they
And
were
he
professors, right?
had transferred to, I think, was it the University of Toronto where he was?
Maybe, yeah.
It was when he first got there, coming back from Boston,
And
maybe.
he stayed there for like a couple years or something.
No, no, no. It was like 8 months.
Oh, or 8 months. Okay,
Yeah, well, it was like until you get established, you find a house,
a
whatever.
considerable amount of time. A
Uh,
considerable amount
yeah,
of time,
enough where they
absolutely.
spent a lot of time together for sure.
And I thought it was just pretty. And this is the problem with any of these people. I thought his other friend that was a Toronto professor as well, University of Toronto professor. At the end, he's like reading his tweets, like shaking his head, and it just comes down to ideological perspectives as who that man, the guy that he lived with, ideologically disagreed with Jordan Peterson, and then put him on
Yeah.
blast to the world.
Well, to expose his eccentricities as like this sign of unhinged.
Yeah,
Basically, he was kind of saying that he's always been unhinged, and now that his unhinged eccentricities are out for public consumption in a wide scale, it's a problem. But I guess this guy didn't care the years that he was teaching young kids,
well, then that's the
the
thing. It's
same
like
things.
Jordan.
So,
Who is that famous writer they interviewed? He was a famous, I think, nonfiction writer. What
oh
he was
no, he's a fiction.
relatively
Yeah, the guy that was his
or
teacher, right?
fiction, excuse me. Yeah, he went to Harvard. That fiction writer.
Yeah,
Um, he wrote novels and stuff, and he was going like Jordan Peterson was an intense fucking guy. Like this is like he did not let ideology on his side or your side. If you brought up an argument, it's got to be a basis in facts and not like this delivered through a message of ideology. He would like shut that shit down in the classroom,
yeah, yeah.
which is really different than most professors. I mean,
Yes. Well, because
most intellectuals.
most professors, you're basically dealing with their ideological perspective. That's how the prism by which they teach information,
Right.
and it's not a good thing, in my opinion, because it undermines this idea that we learn how to critically think in college. Like that should be what you're doing in college, more so than learning a trade or anything. The best benefit you can get out of a college is learning to think for yourself. Um, so yeah, I would agree with that style. I guess Jordan Peterson's at one time style at least.
Well, I don't think that's ever changed, though. I mean, not that he's probably teaching much right now.
I don't think he's teaching at all anymore. He's on an indefinite leave, or not. That was his self-imposed. He did that to himself, or indefinite sabbatical. That's what it is. Yeah.
Right. He probably still has a position when he wants to come back or whatever.
Yeah, this is what happens if you like have an opportunity to like sell a book and do a book tour and stuff.
Yeah.
You could take sabbaticals. Which
is really what has Jordan Peterson caused more harm or more good? I'm going to go to I personally believe he's probably caused more good than harm. And what would the harm be? Really hurting people's feelings and not I think that would be the greatest harm he's done.
Yeah.
Is attack people's morals versus their ideology. Not just their ideology, but also their morals. He really goes on, because that's the whole point of, the echoing of what sacrifice is and what order and chaos and how that brings it, like sacrifice, like the Pinocchio has all these morals that you're supposed, and you see what happens when you don't follow through with good morals, like you turn into a jackass. Literally, that's what happens. You become, like, by drinking and smoking, and it's very interesting from a children's perspective to see that, because that stuff is scary when you're a kid. And still, most people grew up to be drinking and smoking, so I don't know how much of an effect it had. But you go down and you really look at him going to the depths, into the belly of a whale or whatever, to the depths of the ocean, to the belly of a whale to save his father, and which we talked about in Ad Astra, which is that very close moral semblance. But how far will you go to save yourself? And how far should you go to save yourself? And I think you and I know you were very critical of Jordan Peterson, of the amount of time he was speaking, like how frequent and how often he was on these shows. You're like, he's doing too much and he's kind of like stumbling, I guess.
Well, because you can only say the same thing so many different ways, and I do think he kind of came up against that to a certain degree. I don't know if I would say I was very critical, but I was definitely like, there is an oversaturation here that is probably not good.
Well, that's what the documentary brings up. It's kind of, he was just exploded.
Well, yeah, he exploded. He exploded. I don't think and how does anybody know how to deal with that? You know what I mean? Like, how does anybody know how to navigate that? Like, there's a very select few people that have ever been alive that living now that have that kind of notoriety and infamy. I mean, that's like, going on all these adversarial talk shows and interviews. I mean, that's got to take a toll. It's got to take a toll.
He admits it.
And he's talked about it before. Like, he was progressively getting less patient, more like fiery, and it probably came off the wrong way to some people. Now, I think, like, when they had his friend who still says he's his friend, and they're reading the text, or not the text, but the tweets and stuff. I mean, like, that guy's reading that stuff. They're out of context. It's almost like as if they appeared in a vacuum. A lot of times, Jordan Peterson is writing on Twitter, responding to things that are happening in his life in other contexts, and the people that follow him or follow his Twitter kind of already know what he's getting at. So I didn't think that stuff was particularly fair. I don't think it's fair to really put that on him. How, like, the whole the alt-right stuff. Is it fair to blame Jordan Peterson because alt-right people agree with him on certain things? Like, that's ridiculous to me. I mean, how many people follow Jordan Peterson? You're going to talk about, like, this, like, sliver of the population that kind of glommed onto him for memes.
Okay, but that's fair. But then what about Karl Marx and his ideas?
What about him?
Well, I mean, throughout history, the select few countries that have followed these teachings, and obviously they did terrible things.
Yeah.
I mean, they did horrific things.
100%.
All because of Karl Marx. How many good things has Karl Marx contributed to? And you have to ask yourself, well, if Jordan Peterson, should you be responsible for how your ideas can cause chaos? So if you could go back in time and get rid of Karl Marx, just get rid of him. You just saved 500 million people or whatever.
But I mean, but the difference between, like, that example is that Karl Marx came out and said, yeah, revolution is good. Even sometimes it might have to be violent if necessary. These are just part of the machinery of the system. It can be, potentially be. Jordan Peterson never went out and endorsed the alt-right.
No, oh, absolutely not.
And anytime he was ever asked about it, he said, listen, this is basically his position. I think it's the correct position. He's like, you don't just throw people away. You fucking listen to them and you talk to them. How else do you think you're going to get them out of that?
Yeah.
You got to engage with them. That's the problem. And this is a societal problem that we have. We see it, the growing number of incel communities and alt-right people. Like, if you treat people like they're fucking trash and shove them down without conversation or without even an attempt to do something about it, then you're just as fucking responsible. You know?
And then, but that's where the other side was viewing Jordan Peterson as them being suppressed by his.
But do you feel like
views.
their opinion or their position was legitimate? Like, you had like the trans activists, the queer rights activists, right?
I'm not saying it was legitimate.
No,
I'm not saying it was legitimate.
Well, sure, but their position is so faulty, and they couldn't even properly explain the situation that happened in the documentary. They don't even represent it correctly. They don't talk about their own culpability and the problems that happened. And if it wasn't for them, Jordan Peterson might not have ever turned into anything. It was because
I remember the first time I saw him was because of that activist was in his face going, "Do you support the Nazis at your protest?" Remember, like, that famous, he's got the suspenders on, and he's just like, that I would have never heard of him probably, but it was because that video went viral.
And then he'd always had some sort of public life because he was on those Canadian like talk show, and he had done that a few times. And it's just this idea of like, and he kept saying it over and over again. He's like, this is not about pronouns. This is about the enforcement of words and like the government being able to dictate your speech. He's like, he did not really give a shit. It's just a point of principle. It had nothing to do with like some sort of sex rights thing or whatever.
No, absolutely. But from their perspective, that's what they were feeling. Because
they didn't listen. They didn't honestly engage. And then when you hear the person like a couple years later in the documentary talking about it, they still haven't even thought about it. They have not thought about it one bit because it doesn't matter to them. And that's so when they talk about their voices being suppressed, it's like you suppressed yourself. Like when you are dishonest and then people can clearly see you're being dishonest, you lose credibility and nobody wants to listen to you. You know, Jordan Peterson this past year has had, and I don't know if it's completely fair or whatever, but he has had his own crisis of credibility in the public eye because of what happened to his wife and what happened to him, like getting addicted to painkillers. Like,
well, he didn't get addicted to painkillers. He got addicted to benzodiazepine, which is it's Klonopin, which is an anti-anxiety medication.
Anti-anxiety medication. My mistake.
Yeah, but he's never once said that you should never take medication.
No. I'm not saying that at all. But when your image is like, I am the organizer, clean your room, yada yada yada. Like, I'm just saying, for some people, that's going to be a red flag. His daughter's behavior is a little bit of a red flag. In terms of its efficacy, well, like, do you do the things you preach? And this is something everybody comes up against. And I'm not specifically criticizing him, and I understand the circumstances myself about how that came about. And I also don't think people are required to be perfect to have a correct position about a topic.
Well, I think that is the whole premise. I mean, don't be a tyrant to yourself is one of his main monikers. Is do not be a slave to your schedule. Do not be a slave to yourself. These are rules and principles that you can take on one at a time, all together. I don't think it's necessarily he's ever advocated for complete submission to his theory, or his thesis on how to live a more disciplined life and a better way to raise your children or whatever. Which, I mean, look at Michaela. So we don't fucking know. Okay. The meat queen. If you guys don't know, she's the meat queen, but this is the thing. This was, because I would wondered when they started recording this, because this all looked like it happened. But they started recording him.
Well, there is I looked into the director, Patricia Marcosia, I believe is how you pronounce her name. There was a version of this movie that came out in 2018. I think they were following him before this all started.
That's what I'm saying. That's what it looked like. They were in his home.
I think they were. I think they were something like they were probably going to do like a spotlight thing on him, and this turned into something different.
Right, which is kind of, I guess, the grace of luck.
Because he honestly, like, if you talk to any of his students or anything like that, most of them really like Jordan Peterson.
But that's the thing is, it's just, and this is where it comes down to I can't say the word. Sensationalizing. There we go. There we go.
I almost fucked up too. You got your version.
It's a weird word. Sensationalizing. A lot of the things that he does say, and it comes down to the cherry picking of one sentence here, one sentence there. It seems, but if you just listen to him, speak, I don't believe he's ever said anything that's so controversial that is ridiculous.
No.
And that is the part of what's wrong with Twitter. Because you can take little snippets of one possible incoherent thought at one moment, and that is now forever.
Well, that's why I think that was another problem he ran into with like those tabloid shows like Vice. They're gonna trim an hour conversation into 15 minutes.
Didn't they get gutted into like releasing more of it because people were like,
somebody had the raw footage and they played them side by side to show you where they cut out his actual answers. So they would ask a question, and then 10 minutes would go by, and then he would be answering a different question, and they would have that as the answer to the first question.
And that's really what completely disingenuous. And I know you got to sign disclosure agreements or like some sort of contract before you film. I'm sure that this can be edited.
That you have the raw footage.
I mean, someone I don't necessarily agree with on a lot of things, but Avi Yamini, which is he's a Australian, kind of right wing guy, definitely a conservative, Jewish man, and he was going on. What's that comedian's name? That
Jim Jeffries.
Jim Jeffries, this fucking piece of shit. So basically, and this is what Jordan Peterson is talking about, when you let ideology drive what you are putting out to the world, it was completely, because what was the original thing was that they were going to meet him for whatever reason, and then the mosque shootings happened, and then they completely framed the narrative.
They recontextualized an interview that had nothing to do with that as to being about it. Not only that, but they cut it up like they're going to do. And he had footage of behind the scenes while in between taping of how Jim Jeffries actually asks, the kind of jokes he actually makes. Yep. And you could say that this is Jim Jeffries' tactic to get somebody comfortable. So he's going to appeal to that person's sense of person.
Sure.
You can make that argument. I don't know if that was the case or not, but it showed him to be, like you said, his forward-facing person is very ideologically driven, and his private person is more like a normal person.
Probably,
can make jokes about serious things.
It all comes down to money, dude.
And he's a comedian. Like, he's, not back in the day. I kind of checked out. I checked out of a lot of comedians after the election, not because I think Trump jokes are off the table or anything, but it's just like it gets tiresome. Everybody's making the same 10 jokes. But I don't know. But so that was an example.
Though the Avi Yamini case was interesting because you really get to see it. It happens. The people know it happens, but there's no way to prove it. And it's the same thing with the Jordan Peterson and Vice. And you sit there and go, well, how is this right? And how is this acceptable behavior for mainstream media companies to be doing this to people? And this should bring into a lot of question as far as like, where do their ethics line up? Where do their morals line up? What is this about? Is this all supposed to be gotcha? And that's what Jordan Peterson, I think, with Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, long form conversations are becoming more and more relevant. Jordan
Peterson also needs that venue. He needs the long venue. You can't ask him a fucking rapid fire series of questions. Be like, all right, we got 20 minutes. Like, he can't. Yeah. He's going to answer 2 questions. Like, if you do that,
And that was the same thing with like the GQ interview. And you just sit there, you're like, okay, like this chick is a fucking dumbass. And because when you put it, someone, not that Jordan Peterson is like some intellectual genius or anything, but you know what I mean? Like, he's fair. He doesn't try to use his genius to he's not trying to outsmart you. He's trying to have a conversation most of the time. When it becomes adversarial, I'm sure that you can't help but do that. Try to outsmart someone and figure out a way to win, I guess. Yeah. That's probably just natural. But he is really looking to have a conversation most of the time.
And that's what I think that the GQ interview is a good thing where they were like literally sparring. That's a she's not a stupid person. She's obviously very smart. And
that was the problem.
It was very well, I don't know if it's a problem, but he kind of comported himself pretty well. Like he got irritated, and he definitely, when he kind of realized what was happening, and this constant recontextualizing of everything he said to be just the most negative version of it.
Well, you think humans are lobsters, eh?
What? Yeah, like you're just like loaded questions. Like you think humans are like lobsters, and you're like,
he's like, no, we just have similarities in certain
serotonin
genetics
stuff.
Yeah, whatever. Fucking cry. But you're just sitting there going, this is what GQ is going to put. And they put out the hour and 40 minutes. I've watched that several times. I really have. I've watched it several times.
I think I've watched it twice. Yeah.
I've watched it several hundred. No, I don't know. I've watched it quite a few times. And I can't tell me SJW destroy comps of JP that I've watched, but it's awesome. Or Ben Shapiro. But this is the thing is, did Jordan Peterson create an ideology in the process that could also be bad?
I think I think it is probably somewhat of a byproduct. I don't think it is as pervasive as people think, because most of what he's been talking about for like 3 years since that book came out.
What, 2000?
2018, I think, probably.
Sure.
But right before that, because he was promoting the release of the book and going on tour, he's giving this self-help shit. It's not that deep. It's not that crazy. I actually prefer the old school OG 2015, 2016 Jordan Peterson, because I like hearing about meta narratives, how that affects our life, how these things kind of reinforce human nature and the need for hierarchies, how storytelling and legends are a way to preserve our culture and our moral kind of progress throughout the ages. Why are institutions important to also do that? I like that stuff. I'm not as interested in the self-help stuff. I think that stuff was always part of it, but the focus of it really, I'd probably check that a little bit. I read the book. I'm a super fan. I read the book. I've read most of Maps of Meaning. That's a hard book to get through. You bought it for me. Thank you, Dan.
Yep. It's a great book.
He bought it for me when it was at a premium price as well.
$60-something. This is text.
I know. Yeah.
I guess in closing, I mean, I think you feel pretty good about what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I think we've covered it. And if you're interested in Jordan Peterson, it's worth checking out.
Well, it's an interesting documentary for sure. But I think in closing, and the real final question before we move on to the Poughkeepsie, whatever the fucking Poughkeepsie tapes, the real final question is this. Any man that has challenged the narrative of their time or challenged the world at their time, at that moment in time, were viewed as the corruptors of the youth, like Aristotle, right? I think it was Aristotle.
Sure, 100%.
The corruptors of the youth, they're terrible, bad people. But I think, and this is just my personal opinion, how he will be viewed in the future will be drastic. This is going to affect, I think, a lot more than people will realize. And he's going to be viewed as something, I think, positive. At the end of the day, in 50 to 100 years, just like Carl Gustav Jung, or like that's the person he very closely, I guess you could say, idolizes in a lot of ways. That's really going to be, I think he's going to be kind of on that level as far as how we view Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I think the future will be kind to him. And I think there is so much material out there. Even now, I mean, don't watch this documentary thinking you're going to get some sort of full picture, fair hearing. Just go watch, actually, I would say his first 2 Joe Rogan appearances.
Yep. Those are great.
That's Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
It seems like that is him almost in professor mode, where he's like, it's like a 3-hour class lecture about his fundamental beliefs and where he's coming from. And I don't think he's ever really deviated from that, to be honest with you. I think
I don't think it's deviated.
He's always. I do think maybe the fame went to his head a little bit. I don't know. Who can say what's in a person's heart? I'm not going to be like his buddy that wrote an op-ed.
Yeah.
Projecting.
Well,
because if this guy thought this about Jordan Peterson, maybe he should have said something 10 years ago. Like,
or
I don't know.
Should have fucking just called him.
I mean, or called him,
talk to him. And then Jordan Peterson gets fucking sideswiped with some fucking bullshit article written by supposedly one of his good friends.
Yeah.
So it seems like a cash grab to me, if you fucking ask me. But
yeah, because this was a moment for a lot of those people in his circle to get notoriety and get their name out there. Because if you stood in opposition to Jordan Peterson, you're probably going to get some attention.
Yep.
I'm not saying that's why he wrote it. I don't know what his intentions were. I think he really did feel that way. Maybe. I have no idea. Like,
I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson is not susceptible to being overwhelmed by the fame and not seeing himself becoming a monster. But hold on.
Well, I'm just saying all right.
I'm just going to say that he does one of his biggest I guess you'd call it preaching or teachings, is you have to know that you could be a monster to stop yourself from becoming one. Like, and I really do have a hard time him sitting there and not thinking very deeply about this type of stuff when it comes to his own fame. I would be shocked. I would.
Yeah, but I also think, like, you got to talk about this. It's been 4.5 years. That's pretty much his and it was like 3 of those years, 2 of those years have been at this level, at such a crazy international level. Mm-hmm. So I would say he probably hasn't even really had the chance to.
I would doubt that.
Be able to really reflect on, like, and I think, he has in increments because he talks about it. He talks mm-hmm. about the interview stuff when he was on that interview train, just mm-hmm. talking to every single person that wanted an interview got one, mm-hmm. and he was talking about, the pros and cons of that, how tired it made him, et cetera, how it makes you more frustrated, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe we'll see him crawl back from the depths of his, because he did have to deal with that mental health stuff, and maybe he will be better for it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what the next chapter in the Jordan Peterson experience is.
Yeah, and another 12 Rules for Life, bringing it on. Round 2.
The sequel. 12 times 2 rules for life. Yeah, but I would definitely check it out. It's on Amazon Prime if anybody's curious. Like I said, if you find him at all interesting, you don't really know about him, go just look him up on YouTube. Go watch a few interviews. I would recommend the first 2 Joe Rogan ones. I'd recommend even some of his older stuff when he was on the Canadian talk shows are actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. If you really want to know where he's coming from. All right. Next up, this was Dan's pick. I was a little shocked. Dan calls me up yesterday. He says, "Hey, man, remember that Poughkeepsie tapes? That's on Amazon Prime, dog." He's like, "I'm going to watch it." I was like, "Okay, I'll watch it too." All right, so we're going to talk about the Poughkeepsie tapes. So you have seen it before. I think we saw it together when you were young lads.
Yeah.
I definitely had found it through back channels and all my Hollywood contacts. It's been on a shelf, so I had to go through the back. I had to go basically on the dark web. And I had to pay in Bitcoin for a copy of the Poughkeepsie tapes back in about probably 2012. That was the first time I saw it. It was produced in 2009. It had a trailer. It was supposed to come out, and it just never did. I'm not even sure what the fucking deal was, to be honest with you. I don't even really know, like, why it wasn't put out. Yeah. Other than I think maybe the company that had it, the production company, might have went bankrupt. It's directed by, what's his name? John Eric Dowdle, and he is no stranger to the found footage thing. He had done Quarantine around the same time. Actually, the Poughkeepsie tapes, actually, they made it in 2007.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Right after the Poughkeepsie tapes, he did another found footage one, which was Quarantine, which is a remake of a Spanish language film called Rec. REC stands for record. It's pretty much the same movie, but it's actually a pretty decent version of it. He did Devil. Remember that movie with those people in the elevator?
Directed
that, which is good for about 45 minutes. And then it just keeps going. As Above, So Below, which I never saw. That's the found footage movie, I believe. And then he got into the serious business. He did No Escape, which I've never seen. It's got Owen Wilson in it, and I think these people are trying to get out of China or something like that. It's like a family trying to escape, but there's no escape, so they don't. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume. And then he directed the TV miniseries Waco, which I actually saw, and it was okay. So, Dan. So this is, we saw it a long time ago, so this is the first time you've seen it in probably like 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think of the Poughkeepsie tapes?
It was fine. Good first time. Good first time for sure. Kind of, it's like, all right. I mean, because I don't know. I don't even know. There's really not much to say about it besides it's pretty, it's interesting. And it's, yeah. I guess if you didn't know it was fake type deal, but I don't know.
Do you think any of the performances are good enough to convince you?
Some of them, maybe.
There's a few.
Yeah.
There's a few that are like, ugh.
Yeah, there's some shit out. I would say the guy that plays the serial killer is pretty weird. The chick that plays this the main female character in it is pretty decent. I don't know.
My favorite guy is the FBI teacher in the turtleneck.
Yeah.
And he's like, funny. He goes and like pauses the tape. He's like, disturbing.
Yeah. It kind of throws off that same vibe that Paranormal Activity does when you interject like, because there's really only two people in Paranormal Activity until the priest comes around and like maybe a friend or so, but they just come off so. It's weird. It's kind of hard to pull off. It's hard to pull off.
Oh, Paranormal Activity. I think the couple are fine.
Yeah.
Do you think when the priest comes in and gets a little,
the seance or the paranormal guy? Yeah.
Yeah, he's clearly like a local theater guy, that they got to come in to do a bit part.
Yeah.
They didn't have any money. They're like, hey man, you want to be in a movie? He's like, yeah.
And then like everyone's got in this movie like brand new FBI jackets, like it says FBI, like they're brand new out of the package, Yeah. It's those little subtleties, but that is just something to be expected of its time. People weren't really looking out for that type of stuff as much.
Oh, if this kid come out in 2007, 2009, it would definitely be much more well regarded, or at least in people's nostalgia. Yeah. I'm not saying that the movie itself. I think the movie's fine. I honestly, it's I think it's well put together, and I think the stuff with the serial killer is legit creepy. Oh, yeah. I watched it on my laptop while I was like doing dishes this morning and cleaning up, and I was still creeped out by it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely unsettling. You're just thinking, but that's where it comes down to. This guy is some mastermind, Professor Moriarty, whatever, from Sherlock Holmes level, like stealing semen from semen banks and fucking probably, or they're just like doing crazy shit. And you're like, what the fuck? What does this guy do? He has a fake police car, never gets caught with a fake police car, just ripping around. Yeah, what the fuck?
Well, they kind of, I guess, not surmise, but they kind of imply that maybe he was a cop. Or maybe he was at one time a cop.
I guess we're going to write spoilers, people. So
yeah, this movie is
get out now. Go watch it and come back. But when the fucking dude, the guy that gets framed is an FBI agent, right? That's what made it so.
He's a police officer.
Police officer, or you FBI or something? He was definitely in law enforcement, and they kill him. And 2 days later, it's like, oh man, fuck. But then September 11th happens. And it's just very like, oh, okay. I don't know. That stuff is fine though. It's a movie. You gotta have some. Just forget that this is. But if you're a mockumentary, at least try to be more. A little more believable. But
I think if they had better actors, like if they had a little bit more money and they could have got better actors for.
They have that one dude that was playing a cop that I fucking know. There's one guy I've seen in like plenty of stuff.
Oh, there's a few people that I've seen in the interim. Actually, the psychologist at the very end of the movie, the woman with the brunette woman, she is in actually another found footage movie that I actually really like. It's The Last Exorcism.
Oh.
She's the producer that's with the preacher.
Okay. Okay.
But I think if they had got some better actors for some of that stuff, like this would have been really unsettling. It does pull you out. That's why I think if it had come out earlier, we wouldn't be as acclimated to this stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
And now we live in this kind of true crime doc era where we're seeing these things come out every fucking week. So it's just not as crazy anymore. Even though this one is like the craziest. It would be if this was real, this would be the craziest of all of them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and that's the shit that is just. I mean, what this guy, fit 36 different whatever fucking profiles and all. He, constantly adapted and changed. And,
I do like the thing you said about him being like Professor Moriarty.
Yeah, he's pretty much what he is.
How does he not get ever caught?
He goes in his mind. He has like his own mind palace, whatever. And he goes into. He's like, he's just sitting there meditating and shit. And I thought I guess the most interesting part of it is the woman that gets captured pretty early in the film. Yeah. And he basically Stockholm syndrome's this chick. I think I don't remember how many years he had her, but it was a few fucking years, right?
They imply it's like 2 or 3 years, I think.
Yeah, and she's obviously, still in love with him. And
that's the girl that plays the main victim,
she does good.
She was unsettling. Like that part at the end.
Yeah.
It's even like, even though it's fake, I was like, oh, it's a little heartbreaking. Like,
yeah, like
what do you want me to say? I don't know what you want me to say. Like, I can't answer you. I don't have my own thoughts.
It's like Ted Kaczynski. He was abused and used by Harvard.
She's just like Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
look
just
into it. Look into it.
Look into it. This is definitely something that I think I remember seeing it back in the day and being a little more like, whoa, this is fucking crazy. Like, this is weird, man. Definitely, I think we've all had run our course when it comes to most found footage stuff. I mean, there's some really good ones out there. I thought Troll Hunter was pretty good as a found footage film. Yeah. That's fun.
Also unique.
Yeah, but there's something like that is just fun. Oh, when he comes out of the woods.
You don't just have to do horror movies for found footage. Often you can make the argument that is the most effective subgenre to do it in, or the genre to do it in would be horror.
Which this is just true crime, I guess. This wouldn't be considered.
This is like it's horror. It's horror. It's like a thriller.
A thriller would be more accurate. Yeah.
I do like these kind of things because the only problem, and this happens with a lot of this stuff. I think Lake Mungo has this kind of problem. Although Lake Mungo, I think makes a better complete circle. Is that you're gonna walk away with really no answers at the end of it. There is no answers. There's not enough clues in the movie to kind of really discern who he really is. And that's because of the nature of the way they did it.
He's Professor Moriarty. That's who he is. Like, this dude fucking can do anything.
He wears a cape. I mean, come on.
And like, there's this one scene that is pretty fucking creepy though, when those two Girl Scouts come in the house.
Yeah.
And then the girl like freaks out to try to get him out of there. And it's like, oh fuck, man. Like, I was like, I couldn't remember what happened. I'm like, is he about to fucking kill these kids? Probably. But still doesn't make sense, really. Except the one girl was in the neighborhood, I guess, lived there. But
what doesn't make sense if they came into his house, nobody said anything.
Yeah, like these two girls were like, hey, I just heard someone screaming, didn't say a fucking word. Like, hey, this guy had a raccoon in his basement. It was screaming. It didn't even sound real. Like, not. Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah. It was a little whatever. Yeah, check it out. If you're bored, we all got time. I guess right now, a lot of people, thank you, essential workers. But I did my time as being an essential worker. Now it's your turn. And I'm just saying, thank you very much. I don't know, man.
Get off your soapbox, buddy.
Hey, dude. But it's definitely something to watch.
I will say that the torture footage and stuff is legit unsettling. It makes you a little queasy. Definitely made me queasy.
It's like the grainy footage and
90s.
Should I have an erection? Stuff. Should I feel wrong if I have an erection? What kind of shit am I watching?
I've seen a lot of bondage videos that are just like this. They all start just like this, okay? And they're fine.
Yeah. I would say go check it out.
I'm not weird. I ain't the weird one, okay?
I think there's enough stuff out there that I would say, yeah, go check it out. But make it kind of on the latter end of the list. I would say, like towards the end, like maybe
If you're
not
into
the high, not the ladder.
if you're into the subgenre, like it's an interesting artifact, and if you're into like just movies or horror in general, it's probably just good to see for posterity and just to kind of see the growth. It's kind of almost like the end of like the torture porn cycle that we went through in the early mid 2000s with like the early Saw movies, the Hostel movies. This was kind of almost like a period on that, because after this, it kind of doesn't really exist that much anymore around this time period. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else to say. There are better found footage movies. He's made better. This guy has made. I would say if you're gonna watch this or his version of Quarantine, I'd watch Quarantine. Quarantine's better.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen Quarantine years, but
Quarantine is like
Yeah, I know what it is. I know what it is. It's got the chick from Dexter in it.
It's got the chick from Dexter in it, and
that
it's like basically like a
Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Or what would you call it? Where do those people live? They live in like an apartment complex.
Yeah.
And there's zombies.
They get quarantined.
There's zombies.
Can't fucking leave.
The Mexican one's a little bit better because the zombies aren't just zombies; they're like demons. You don't find that out until Rec 2. It's good stuff. Rec 2 is pretty sweet. It's a pretty badass movie. It was when I was like 20, so maybe
I haven't
not
seen
now.
I haven't seen the Rec movies.
Whoa, my goodness, Dan, you're cheating yourself.
I guess so, dude. No.
Yeah, or actually, you know what's a found footage movie I always recommend to people is I do that all the time. Dropping the phone. I always recommend people The Last Exorcism. You're gonna have to forgive the last 2 minutes. Some people don't like it. I don't. I thought it was fun, but that is one of the more convincing performances in a found footage movie. The guy who's like the main dude, the exorcist preacher, is phenomenal. He's excellent in that movie.
It's Thomas Jane, right? Or whatever his fucking name
No, he kind of looks like Thomas Jane, but it's not Thomas Jane.
Who the fuck is it? What's his fucking name?
Some like soap opera actor, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and he was great. He's fantastic. Yeah, man. Or go watch the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really. I mean, Blair Witch Project is kind of interesting.
First time though, that shit was crazy. That was like the first time I ever seen some shit like that.
It's wild to go watch it now to see how tame it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a very tame movie. Very tame.
What's the fucking name of them?
Which one? The last Exorcism.
Patrick Fabian. That must be his name.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay,
he doesn't look nothing like him. I don't know what the fuck I was talking about.
He's got like a similar dome shape, his face structure. But yeah, that's I think that's gonna do it for this episode. So thanks for listening, everybody. I know you weren't expecting an extensive conversation about Jordan Peterson, but you're welcome.
Yeah.
This is what we do. And we will be back later this week. Tiger King hype.
Yes, baby.
It's Michael is going to actually be joining Zoobox Goes to the Movies. We're all going to be talking about Mike's secret life as a tiger trainer. Because I don't know if you've ever seen Joe Exotic and Mike at the same time. Has anybody seen them in a room at the same time? I don't think so, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
He just has extensive plastic surgery every other week. It's good stuff. All right, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you in a few days.